to 68 Media Network. Your host, Dan Dickau, for the Bulldog Broadcast. Special guest today, Rich Waltz. But before we get his thoughts on a number of topics, want to say thank you to our sponsors, McGillivray Environmental, Shoot 360 Spokane, and our new sponsor, Wave Capital. Check them out. Appreciate their support. So, Rich, thanks for joining.
That's right.
Usually our guests, we're on separate cameras, but today we're calling a game in Colorado for Boise State at Colorado State later tonight. So,
and now you know what announcers look like when they go to shoot around. They don't shave.
Yeah,
their hair is disheveled, but yours is kind of permanently that way.
It's always disheveled. You're right. So, reason I wanted to have you on, Rich, is you've seen Gonzaga early this season when they had a terrific road win. You've now seen them on the road in league against Oregon State, where they weren't quite able to finish that game off. Wanted to see your thoughts on what has progressed in your eyes for Gonzaga this season.
Well, look, they looked great in the San Diego State game. We did, and I thought they looked really, really good in the Oregon State game. And both of those environments were really hostile environments. San Diego State's Viejas is awesome, but the scene that you and I experienced in Corvallis was off the chain. It was incredible. It's hard to compare games that are 2-3 months out.
Mm-hmm.
I was more not dismayed, but surprised by the Santa Clara score when I saw it. You called that game. I watched bits and pieces of it. Then I was the Oregon State score, because Oregon State in that game, to me, played as well as they could have played. And I've always looked at Gonzaga like the Yankees, right?
Yeah.
Or the Patriots when they were going great, in that wherever they showed up, they got that other team's A game. That game is circled on the calendar. It certainly was for Oregon State. That's, they were talking about that game in all summer, like, hey, Gonzaga's coming to the place. So when you're Gonzaga, you've earned it. And part of earning it is you get the A game. You get everybody's best game. And San Diego State game was the one unique thing about that is Miles Bird didn't play.
Yeah.
And you and I have seen Miles Bird a couple times. He's a difference maker defensively and offensively for them. So I was impressed with Gonzaga on that. There, sometimes the marking of a great game is when all you think about is the finish and Ratai going off in overtime. But when you stop and think about it, Gonzaga hit 2 huge clutch threes in the end of regulation. The Greg three, it was a return pass from the top. He was, right wing, not an easy shot. And then Ike ends up in that last sequence with a ball in his hand behind the arc and calmly steps up and drills it. Those were huge moments, I think, for Gonzaga, but they kind of get washed away by the fact that Oregon State ended up winning the game. So I thought the Bulldogs I thought they played extremely well in that game.
Yeah.
That game could have gone either way.
It's funny you mentioned kind of those 2 big threes get washed away. You're right. Because at the end of the day, you just look wins and losses.
Yeah.
Well, we're sitting here at Moby Arena, Colorado State. You and I have called games in the Mountain West Conference for a number of years.
Yeah.
And Gonzaga and many of these Mountain West teams are going to be a part of the newly formed Pac whatever number they come up with. Just how difficult is it to win in this league in some of these environments Gonzaga is going to have to travel to in the upcoming future?
I think they got a taste of it at Oregon State, because Oregon State's going to be in the league. And they got a taste of it at San Diego State for sure. I think if you're, as you transplant Gonzaga into this league, I'm really interested to see, Gonzaga's always had a beautiful offense, and that's kind of what they're known for. Mark Few has said in the last week, defensively, we have to get better.
Mm-hmm.
So in this league, you've got to be able to defend. And that's kind of the DNA of this. You always call it like the Big Ten light, the junior Big Ten. There's a couple outliers. Utah State and New Mexico's offenses are more Gonzaga-like. But no, this is going to be, in 2 years, this is going to be a really, really good basketball conference. And I think you see that now with the addition of Washington State and Oregon State in the West Coast Conference. Just look at the net ranking for the conference. Yeah. Look at the teams, Mark Few said it during shoot around at Corvallis. The fact that we can come in here and play a top 60 team on the road. Washington State is coming to our place. They're, in the top 100 in the net. That those, as this league learned, the Mountain West learned last year, if you have a thick, good net conference ranking, it pays off in the end. They got 6 teams in the NCAA tournament because of that last year. So I think you see that a little bit with the West Coast Conference now with Oregon State, Washington State, and I think you'll see more of that when the Pac-12 takes form in 2 years. And hopefully you and I will still be doing games.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it. Great stuff. Thanks a lot, Rich.
You got it. Thank you.
All right.
To the Zags.
Field of 68 Media Network. I'm your host, Dan Dickau, for the Bulldog Broadcast. Well, it's got an interesting couple topics I want to go over today. Might be including a conversation with fellow play-by-play partner from CBS Sports, Rich Waltz, who was with me on the call in Corvallis down at the Oregon State loss the other day for Gonzaga. Would love to get his take in the fact that was the first time second time he had seen Gonzaga in person this year, first time being San Diego State. But really quickly, what do these losses mean for Gonzaga after having gone 0-2? You heard me right. 2 consecutive losses for Gonzaga. The second time this year that's happened, I'd have to look that up actually. The last time there was a season that Gonzaga lost consecutive games twice in a season. I know it's been quite some time, but this is the point of the year where you're more than a third, almost halfway into league. You're starting to see the league kind of standings shift. You start to pay attention to who's played who, and a lot of people can look at it and say, hey, Gonzaga's had a tougher road than, say, St. Mary's. And yes, that's true. St. Mary's does sit at 6-0, though. St. Mary's is about to hit a tough stretch. Later this week, I do know on Saturday, they're at Washington State. So that is a huge opportunity for the Cougars, and it's a chance where Gonzaga, you would assume, takes care of their business on Saturday at University of Portland. They don't lose too much ground. They've got a chance to climb back in, because really when you look at it, the WCC standings sit at this way right now. St. Mary's 6-0, San Francisco as well as Santa Clara sitting at 6-2, Gonzaga and Washington State at 5-2, and Oregon State, after having lost on the road, sits at 4-3. So really Gonzaga a game and a half back in the standings. And the other thing with that is you play nothing against Portland. They're going to win. They'll be 6-2. St. Mary's, say Washington State is able to defend their home court on Saturday. They pick up a loss. Now Gonzaga would only be 1 behind them in the loss column after this week. San Francisco and Gonzaga have not matched up yet. They have 2 games left on that schedule. St. Mary's has 2 games against each other. Gonzaga still plays Washington State once in Pullman, and they play Oregon State one more time at home. So, as much as doom and gloom as I've heard from a lot of fans just being out and about over the last few days at the grocery store or different places, there's a ton of basketball to be played left this season. There's a ton of good opportunity wins in regards to net rankings, quad 1, quad 2 games that hasn't been the case in the WCC in years past. In years past, when you look at quad 1 opportunities, you only had maybe 1, and that would have been on the road at St. Mary's. And it was a toss-up if San Francisco or maybe Santa Clara was in that category. That's not the case this year, because let's break down the net real quick. So a quad 1 win is defined as a home game win, or a home game against a 1 through 30 net ranked team. A quad 1 win on the road is 1 through 75. Quad 2 would be 31 through 75 at home, 76 through 135 on the road. So where this gets interesting and important is the fact that Gonzaga plays St. Mary's twice. They play Santa Clara on the road once, so that's 3. They play San Francisco twice, so that's 5. They play Washington State one more time, so 6. Oregon State 7. Because all 6 of those teams are currently in the top 75 of the net, that's given you 6 or 7 potential quad one, quad two opportunity wins, something that has not been the case in the WCC since the net rankings became important and the focus became on quad one, quad two opportunity wins. Now, the disappointing thing or the frustrating thing is when you look at it, Gonzaga right now sits in quad one games at 2-5. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to get it done. They currently sit at they were 20 in the net 2 days ago. Last I checked it, late last night, they were 18 in the net. So you're not going to see much fluctuation with Gonzaga in the net until this next weekend after they play at Portland. That game's not going to do anything for them. It's a road win, or it's a road game that is a quad four opportunity. I mean, Portland sits at, Ken Palm, they're sitting at like 312. Net is 300 plus as well. So that's not going to move the needle in any way, shape, or form. The only thing it can maybe do is if you have a commanding win, and this is where the net's a little funky because there's a portion of it that tracks or takes it takes advantage of or takes a look at what your point differential was. And I don't necessarily agree with it, but it is what it is. So that's many times why when you see a team maybe up 20 with 3 minutes left and analytically the game has been final, coaches will keep players in. So instead of maybe having a 15-point road win or 15-point home win, whatever it may be, and you give some of your younger players an extra 2 minutes down the stretch, they'll leave starters in. So maybe they could push that 20-point lead up to a 25, 26-point win because those small details right now with the numbers and the analytics really gonna do impact a lot of things in regards to your net. Other thing I wanted to look at was, Ken Palm. Gonzaga sits, as we speak, 15th in Ken Palm. They're 6th on the offensive side of the floor. They're 62 in defensive efficiency. If you look at January 2nd game against University of Portland, they were 7th in Ken Palm. If you look at the Gonzaga at early December, this would have been right in between Kentucky. When they played Kentucky on the 7th, they were 4th in Ken Palm, and they were 5th in Ken Palm when they played Connecticut. So those numbers have dramatically shifted. Gonzaga has been top 6, 7 now on the offensive end of efficiency throughout the season. If you look at their defensive numbers, though, if you were to go back in early December, their defensive efficiency numbers were sitting in the mid-teens. This last 3 weeks or so, they've gone from about 27, I believe, in defensive numbers all the way to 62 defensive efficiency numbers. And those things are going to happen when you give up 3 consecutive games, Washington State, Oregon State, Santa Clara, where teams are shooting more than 50% from the field. Those are all things that I'm sure are going to get addressed defensively, how we can drive opponents' offensive efficiency numbers back down in the other direction and help us improve getting ready for the stretch run of the season. But I wanted to quickly take a look at the 2 games that were just played. Some things that obviously, if you're a Gonzaga fan watching this, you've paid close attention. You've watched the games. You've probably read the articles. You've maybe watched or listened to other podcasts. Quick review of the game and then kind of talk about the week forwards, how you kind of fix a couple of the defensive miscues and things to look at moving forward. But granted, that Oregon State game, I thought it was a terrific game. Luckily, I was on the call for CBS Sports. First time Gonzaga's played in Corvallis in over 30 years. I thought it was a tremendous environment, and that's what Gonzaga is going to have to start getting used to for league games. When you add Oregon State, Washington State this year, those are going to be great crowds. 9,300 sellout at Guild Coliseum. I would expect Beasley down at Washington State to be a pretty great atmosphere a couple weeks from now. But when you move to the new revamped Pac-12, whatever it ends up becoming, you're going to have those 2 schools. You're going to have San Diego State. You're going to have Fresno State, which is a huge arena. They don't draw, but it's a big environment. And Gonzaga has proven that they draw crowds. You've got Boise State, who's sold out most games this year. You've got Colorado State, which has a tremendous home environment. So looking at, from the fan experience, the fan perspective, this new league is going to be great, as compared to the old Pac-12, because there were a lot of dead environments, when you would go play road games. Outside of maybe Arizona, Washington would draw well on occasion. Oregon would draw well on occasion, but a lot of those other venues would be dead. But that Oregon State game, they did everything they needed to do on the offensive end of the floor. They limited it 12 turnovers. I thought they shot the ball well. They executed on the offensive end. Graham Ike had a terrific game. Ben Gregg had a big time game, 15 points, 13 rebounds. Ryan Nembhard had another double-double. A couple of the things that, stuck out to me, Caliph Battle, showed signs in past games of being overly aggressive at times, trying to draw fouls in maybe not the most opportune times. I think there was 2 occasions in the second half where overpenetrate, and with his big physical frame, he's able to draw contact, get fouls in odd situations at times. But you also have to make it look like it's a basketball move as opposed to just driving in and flailing. And I think, he was caught in between those 2 areas where he was clearly trying to score, but maybe a little bit over accentuating drawing contact, so he didn't get the calls. Got to get back to him shooting the ball the way he was the first 7-8 games of the season, the way he played down at LMU, where I think he was 10 of 12 from the field, for 27 points, if I remember right. I think he will. I think, sometimes guys have a tendency to press at times, and it looks like he pressed a couple times over these last few games when maybe he's missed a shot he wanted or he thought was going to make, tried to draw a foul, didn't get the call, tries to put the onus on the official the next time, doesn't get the call. And sometimes that can snowball on guys. But I think you'll see him turning around pretty quick. I thought, obviously, you watched the game. Ike hit that big 3 to send it into overtime. Full disclosure, though, it was a travel. Should have been called a travel. But Gonzaga fans will take it as that 3 that he made sends the game to overtime. But really, the problems in that game, we talked about some of the positives. Nembhard, Gregg having all 8 offensive rebounds. Ike playing well down the stretch with that big 3. The struggles were on the offensive end, on the defensive end of the floor. That from about the 4-minute mark, where I believe they were up 6 or 7, Oregon State executed as well as you can ask on the offensive end of the floor if you're Wayne Tinkle. They ran a number of big to big, high pick and rolls, kind of elbow to elbow stuff that the San Antonio Spurs used to do years ago with Tim Duncan, where they would get Michael Rataj in a pick and roll and then give him some space, let him go to work. He hit some tough shots. He hit a shot off the glass going right over Ben Gregg. A possession or 2 later, he hit a unbelievable scoop finish, kind of an up and under around Graham Ike, high off the glass. So he hit big shots. When Gonzaga switched Braden Huff in for Ike after Ike fouled out, they went right at Braden Huff, whether it was with Michael Rataj or with the other freshman, Layla Vicious, who hadn't scored up till that point. They went right at Braden Huff, and that was a difficult matchup for him. Thank you to our presenting sponsors. If you have interest in joining the Bulldog broadcast, the Field of 68 Media Network, for being a sponsor, don't hesitate to reach out to me, Dan Dickau at hotmail.com. Presenting sponsor, McGillivray Environmental can handle any of your construction needs, specializing in new construction, repairs, residential and commercial asphalt paving, excavation, environmental remediation, and hazardous waste. Reach out to Kip McGillivray at McGillivray Environmental today at 208-556-6384 for your free estimate. Are you interested in investing in Pacific Northwest real estate? Are you an accredited investor, private investor, or want to be a private investor? Look up my friend Dan Can's website, investwithdancan.com. I've known Dan for over a decade, and he is honest, hardworking, truthful, and will do a great job in helping you navigate the world of real estate lending and investing. Check him out today, investwithdancan.com.
The world's leading immersive basketball training experience that combines in-person skill development with digital gamification and virtual competition. At Shoot 360, you will train with our coaches, measure your skills with our proprietary technology, and track your progress on the Shoot 360 mobile app. Shoot 360 Spokane. Unlock your game.
But in overtime, same thing. Oregon State executed offensively. I thought they had tremendous spacing. They had the ability to create opportunities within their offense, and then guys were able to execute. DeMarco Minor hit a number of jump shots. I think he had 2 step backs in that last 4-minute stretch and then overtime where he was really good. And they just executed. And sometimes it's, hey, hats off to the other team. But I think some of that execution had to do with, Gonzaga not locking in defensively. A lot can be said. People are going to have said, I've heard it, hey, why are guys making jump shots? Well, yeah, it's the guy that's guarding the ball at the time, but it's also everything that goes into the possession right when a player is about to shoot. So if an opponent's running, say, for example, a high pick and roll up top, the ball handler's job and duty, usually, I would say 90% of the time, there's a few special circumstances and in instances where you don't. You influence that ball handler to use the screen. So you give them one option. So that's typically job number 1. Job number 2 is the guy guarding the screener has to clearly communicate what the defensive coverage is. Gonzaga doesn't trap a ton of ball screens. A lot of times what they'll do is called a hard hedge, where he doesn't allow the ball handler to turn the corner. They have to kind of pause or go a step or 2 away from the basket, allowing the ball handler's defender to get back underneath and square up, getting between him, the man on the basket. As this is happening, the 3 weak side defenders or help side defenders have to be aware on the backside of where screening opportunities or cutting opportunities may come from with their own men, while being in the gaps, not allowing that ball handler to turn the corner, get all the way to the paint or the rim, while being in the gaps, not allowing the screener to potentially roll to the basket, while also being aware of the screener's defender or the screener. If he pops, do we get it just enough in that gap? It's called a stunt, where you're there, but you're not there. So if that pass does get thrown to a pop guy, you kind of bluff at it, stunt at it is what it's called, giving the screener's defender time to get back within that time frame to take away a catch and shoot. Now, a lot of times that's the base defense, but then there will be adjustments where maybe you switch that throwback pass, where then the big has to go cover the guy who helped onto the pop guy. Many times, if there's a screen on the opposite side, they'll switch that screen to be able to stay, a lot of times with a big on the low side, a perimeter on the top. And if you're not quite in position on that early part of the offensive set that the offensive is running, now everything, it's like a domino effect. One thing leads to another, and then by the 3rd, 4th, 5th domino chain reaction, you're going to be late. And so many times that's what happens is, people see that guy get the shot hit over him, but they don't see that first breakdown, which might be minor. The second one becomes a little bit bigger. The third one becomes, okay, the dam is broken. Now we got to get in scramble mode, and getting into scramble mode defensively many times is hard to cover because you're trying to plug gaps as opposed to defensively influence and pressure and push someone to where they want to be. So that's a lot of what I saw in the Oregon State final stretch of the game. That's a lot of what I saw in the entire Santa Clara game. I think, just talking through, responsibilities defensively. Hopefully, as a listener to this, that will kind of clue you in and teach you a little bit about, it's not one particular player defensively. It's not one particular way you guard in action, because there's multiple ways that Gonzaga works on guarding different actions, whether it's pick and roll, whether it's dribble handoff, whether it's a post up, whether it's switching. There's lots of different ways, but a lot of times people will see, and it's human nature. You see the final result, and that might be a jump shot over the top of a perimeter player, but that isn't necessarily due to the fact that the perimeter player got a shot hit on him. Yes, they got a shot hit on him, but maybe they were plugging a gap, helping someone else because they missed their rotation and now they have to get back. So all these things go hand in hand. These are all things that, with having a full week from game to game, Saturday to Saturday, I'm sure Gonzaga got back to the basics of their fundamental base defense on Monday, Tuesday, and now it being Wednesday when we're recording this. Things are going to get covered. Things are going to get cleaned up. You saw that in some of the articles with some of the quotes, the comments that were made. We're going to get back to the basics of what we're doing. And I think that you'll see a much better defensive effort this upcoming Saturday against Portland. Because then when you look at the Santa Clara game, when you get in the meat of a season, sometimes it's hard to just completely flush a game and get to the next. There's a kind of a hangover effect to how you play. And this can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. And I think it was a bad thing in regards to the hangover from the defensive miscues down the stretch against Oregon State, kind of led to, confidence for Santa Clara to come in and say, hey, they executed offense. We can execute offense very similarly. And you saw Santa Clara get off to a hot start, especially behind Tyree Bryan, who played really well in that first half. But that Santa Clara game, a 103-99 loss, they gave up 17 threes. That's an unheard of number. 18 threes that game. Tyree Bryan was really good. Mentioned him. He finished with 35, including the final kind of nail in the coffin three, which was on one of those kind of team domino effect of rotation defensively. A lot of people are going to say, well, Nolan Hickman had that three hit over him across the way from the Santa Clara bench. And yeah, that was Nolan Hickman's rotation, but he was also in help side, plugging a hole, plugging a gap, trying to be there. Could he have maybe shaded a little bit more? Yes, hindsight maybe 50-50. But all in all, shot clock winding down, you got to be in the positions to take things away. Adama Ball for Santa Clara, scoreless in the first half, had all 20 of his points in the second half. Tilly for Santa Clara played really well. Then when you look at Gonzaga's side, I thought Hickman shot the ball really well again. Those are good signs. He's been doing that as of late. 6 of 10 from the three-point line, 24 points. Braden Huff scored it like crazy again after struggling in Oregon State, 16 points in 10 minutes. But he's still struggling on that defensive end of the floor, where they're going to throw it in the post. They're going to try to attack him, put him in foul trouble. But when they get him isolated, potentially in a pick and roll and a switch, they're really going to try to attack. So I know he knows it. I know the staff knows it. There's something they're working on. They've worked on. He has gotten better at that end of the floor, but it's just a concerted effort. And again, sometimes it snowballs in the middle of the season. Teams pick out one or two ways to really attack you. They're going to go at it time and time again until you can clean that up. So I would look to that to be another focal point for Gonzaga to clean up pick and roll defense with Huff in it. Ike played well, 21 points until that weird flagrant foul, and then he ended up getting a technical. I like the fire and the emotion. It just seems a couple times these last few games he's gotten chippy. But you need that right now because there's been low energy in the gym many times from Gonzaga recently. And you saw the low energy to start the game against Santa Clara, which allowed Santa Clara to kind of jump out, get a lot of confidence. The most energy you saw from Gonzaga was that last maybe 5 minutes where they put that different unique group in. Ajayi was in, Stromer was in, and they picked up full court. Ben Gregg was able to come up with a couple steals, couple deflections. They were able to score, and they cut it to, I think it was 2, it might have been 3, where they made it really interesting in that last minute. That's just one of those things where fans are going to say, well, why don't they play that way the whole time? You can't. I mean, this Gonzaga team is not structured to play 40 minutes of full court press defense trapping. As a matter of fact, I don't know if any team in college is structured or conditioned in the way to do that. It takes in a special way to recruit, takes a special way to really kind of build your team to be able to do that. And this Gonzaga team is not structured that way. You can do it on occasion. And catch your opponent on a surprise, which is what they did. I mean, Santa Clara did a really good job taking care of the basketball until that last stretch. I think they had 5 turnovers in a short stretch that allowed it to become interesting. Ben Gregg played well again. Ryan Nembhard had 9th double-double of the season. So, I mean, you're talking about he's making the right decisions on that end of the floor, putting guys in positions. You can't ask him to do too much more, but as a collective, I think for Gonzaga, defensively, it's got to get cleaned up with not just responsibility on the ball, but connectivity, the connectedness with guys, and that will happen. That will get cleaned up. I'm not in any type of concern for Gonzaga not making the NCAA tournament at this time. They do have their work cut out for them, but if you look at the majority of the bracketologists, they're still solidly sitting at a 7, 8, or 9 seed right now. If you drop a game, not at St. Mary's, say for example, you lose at Pacific, or you lose at Portland this weekend. Now you got cause for concern, where you're going to have to handle business in the WCC tournament. But you look at this weekend's game at University of Portland. Gonzaga handled them well up at the Spokane Arena. I think they fell down 3-0, and then they went on a 20-0 run. So they jumped out, and the result wasn't in doubt after the 6-minute mark in the first half. So what you want to see from Gonzaga is growth on the defensive end of the floor, executing your responsibilities offensively. Continue to do what you're doing. Again, you're the 6th most efficient offense in the country. There's no pause for concern right there. There's no worries right there. You've just got to kind of keep the ball in Nembhard's hands, making the right decisions. When you throw it into EK, have him read double team, single coverage. If it's single, go to work and score. If it's doubles, kick it out, play swing, play on that second side of the floor. When they get more of their continuity stuff, where it's continuity ball screen or into the dribble handoff actions, turn a corner, put the defense in rotation, just as they've done to Gonzaga a lot lately. Kick, find open shooters, and then the shooters on the wings, whether it's Hickman, Stromer, Battle, be ready to be aggressive and knock shots down, hunt shots, really. I mean, I think that's one thing that Hickman has started to do is find open areas and knock down shots. So, it is interesting because this game against Santa Clara was only the second game that Greg Heister, myself, Richard Fox have called a loss with the regional broadcasts. And quite frankly, these close games are a lot more fun to call. You talk more strategy, you talk more what just happened, you talk more what's to come in the next possession or two, as opposed to talking big picture stuff. And so the fun game to call, frustrating game to call. I'm sure that you can imagine as a former Gonzaga player wanting them to win, although on air I call it down the middle. But as a fan, I just urge you, don't lose the faith. This team is right there on the offensive end of the floor, clean up a few things defensively, and they've got a tremendous opportunity in front of them in the coming weeks. And I even think deep into March. Maybe not Final Four deep into March like a lot of people thought after that Baylor win, but this is still a very good basketball team. Coach Few and staff will get this group dialed in, and I think you're going to see a run very similar to last year's team. So for the Field of 68 Media Network, the Bulldog Broadcast, I'm your host, Dan Dickau. Thanks for listening. Again, big time thanks to our sponsors, McGillivray Environmental, Shoot 360 Spokane, and Wave Lending, Invest with DanCam. Thanks again to those sponsors. Check them out. Take care. We'll see you again next week.